The myth of Perseus and Medusa is one of the great tales in Greek mythology. Let us unlock the meaning of unfamiliar words. Oracle, a person such as priestess of ancient Greece through whom a deity is believed to speak, or a person giving wise or authoritative decisions or opinions. Vexed, aggravated, annoyed, irritated. Gorgon, any of three snake-haired sisters in Greek mythology whose appearance turns the beholder to stone, an ugly or repulsive woman. Dreadful, causing great and oppressive fear. Hideous, offensive to the senses and especially to sight, or exceedingly ugly. Dreadful, causing great and oppressive fear. Oblige, to do something as or as if as a favor, to constrain by physical, moral, or legal force or by the exigencies of circumstance. Sickle, an agricultural implement consisting of a curved metal blade with a short handle fitted on a tank. Pain, having or showing undue or excessive pride in one's appearance or achievements, or conceited. Devour, eat up greedily or ravenously. Homeward, toward home, or being or going in the direction of home. Cease, to cause to come to an end, especially gradually, or no longer continue. Quoit, a flattened ring of iron or circle of rope used in a throwing game. Grasp, to take or seize eagerly, to clasp or embrace especially with the fingers or arms. Dwell, to remain for a time, to live as a resident. Consent, to give assent or approval. Antic, an attention drawing, often wildly playfully or funny acts or action. Noble, possessing outstanding qualities. Wander, to move about without a fixed course, aim, or goal, or to roam over. Resist, defy, fight, to exert force in opposition. The mythical story of Perseus and the Medusa. There was once a king in Greece who did a very cruel thing. An oracle had foretold to him that he would be killed by his own grandson. He was determined that this should not come to pass, so he tried to cheat the gods. He placed his beautiful daughter and her baby son in a chest and threw them into the sea, thinking that by doing this he would never see them again and need never fear his little grandson. But the waves were kind to the princess and her child. The chest floated lightly upon the water, and at last came to rest upon the sandy beach of an island. Here it was found by a fisherman, and the princess and her child were received and cared for by the ruler of the island. They lived there for many years, while the boy, who was called Perseus, grew to be a strong and active youth. For some time, the people were very kind to them, but at last, the ruler of the island became vexed at the mother of Perseus and made her his slave. Then, because Perseus had become such a strong young man, one more time he found himself in the way of one king, this time King Polydectes, who wanted Danae to become his wife. Knowing that he wouldn't have the woman for himself as long as Perseus was there to protect his mother, the king made an impossible journey to send Perseus in a deadly mission. King Polydectes told Perseus to bring him the head of the Gorgon and mortal Medusa. There dwelt a terrible woman called Medusa, the Gorgon. The hair of the Gorgon was a mass of living snakes, and she was so hideous to behold that just to look upon her turned one to stone. Perseus was commanded to bring home the head of this woman, and although he set out obediently, he did not know at all where to find her. But while he was wandering helplessly about, the god Hermes and the goddess Athena came to his aid and gave him courage for his dreadful task. They told him that he must have a pair of winged sandals to help him on his way, and also a helmet which would make him invisible. These wonderful things were in the cave of some water nymphs, and he could find out where these nymphs were only by going to some dreadful old woman who had but one eye and one tooth among them. These they were obliged to pass around from one to the other as they needed them. Hermes led Perseus to these old women and then left him. At first, Perseus could not get them to tell him what he wished to learn. But when he stole their one eye as they passed it on from one to another to look at him, they were glad enough to tell him what he wanted in order to get back their eye again. When at last Perseus reached the cave of the nymphs, he easily obtained the sandals and the helmet. Putting these on, he soon reached the cave of Medusa and found her lying asleep on the ground. But he did not dare to approach her face to face, for fear lest he should be turned to stone. Then it was that the goddess Athena came to his aid and gave him her bright shield to use as a mirror. Holding this before him, Perseus walked backward, looking not upon Medusa, but only upon her reflection in the shield. When he was near enough, he struck off her head with a curved sickle which Hermes has given him, and still, without looking at it, he thrust the head into a bag and hurried away. As he journeyed back from the ends of the earth toward his home, many adventures befell him, and he found that the Gorgon's head was a powerful weapon. It was better than a sword or a spear, for if he wished to harm his enemies, he had only to take Medusa's head from its bag and hold it before their eyes. Then at once they were turned to stone. One of his adventures ended in his gaining a beautiful princess as his wife. As he passed through the country of the Ethiopians, he found everyone in great distress. The queen of the country was a very vain woman, who had boasted that she was more beautiful than the nymphs who lived in the sea nearby. This had made the nymphs so angry that they had begged the Greek god Poseidon to punish the queen. He did this by rolling a great flood of his salty water upon the land, and sending with it a sea monster that devoured both beasts and men. The country suffered so much from these misfortunes that the king sent to an oracle to discover how they might escape from them. The oracle replied that the only help was to sacrifice the king's daughter Andromeda to the sea monster. For a long time, the king refused to do this, for Andromeda was a beautiful girl and he loved her dearly. But at last he could resist the wishes of his suffering people no longer. Andromeda was led from her father's house to a rock upon the seashore and chained there alone to await the coming of the monster. But before she had been harmed, Perseus passed that way. He wondered at finding a beautiful maiden weeping in chains, and went to her aid. He killed the monster as it came out of the deep and broke the chains that found Andromeda. Then they went together to her father's city, and Perseus claimed Andromeda as his bride because he had saved her from the dreadful death. The people were glad enough to be rid of the monster and to have their beautiful princess back alive once more. But they did not wish to give her away again to this strange young man. So Perseus took her without her consent. And when some of them tried to prevent it, he turned the men to stone with his gorgon head and went on his way homeward with Andromeda at his side. When he came to his old home, he used Medusa's head again. This time, it was the man who had mistreated his mother whom he turned to stone. In his place as king, he put the good fisherman who had found him and his mother in the chest on the shore of the sea. Then Perseus went across the sea to find the grandfather who had been so afraid of him when he was a little child. When the old king learned that his grandson had not been drowned after all, and that he was alive and coming to see him, he was more afraid than ever. Now he was sure that the oracle would come true, and that this young man would kill him for what he had done so long ago to him and his mother. So he fled from his city and hid himself. But Perseus followed him and found him and showed him that he came only to do honor to him. Then his grandfather welcomed him and ceased to fear him, and caused games to be held to celebrate the coming of his strong and noble grandson who had come to him in his old age. But alas, in the midst of the games, a dreadful accident happened. One of the games was hurling the quoits, and as Perseus was throwing the round, flat piece of iron, it slipped from his grasp and struck his grandfather so that he fell dead. So the oracle was fulfilled at last. Perseus was so sorry for what he had done that he would not accept the throne of his grandfather, though the people wished him to do so. He exchanged his kingdom for another one, where he would not always be reminded of what he had accidentally done. And there he lived happily with Andromeda for many years.